He'd been driving Uber in Chicago for 9 years, taking the late-night shift that most drivers avoided, the hours between midnight and 6 a.m. when the city belonged to night shift workers, partiers heading home, and people with emergencies. Just a quiet guy in his late 40s who kept his car immaculately clean and always knew the fastest routes. Until the night when a terrified college student got into his car fleeing from someone following her, and in the tense minutes that followed, everyone discovered that their calm Uber driver wasn't just good at navigating city streets, he was a former Special Forces operator who had spent a decade conducting covert operations, and he still knew exactly how to disappear when someone's life depended on it. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this intense story of hidden expertise and protective instincts, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who continue protecting others long after leaving the shadows. Marcus Chen started his Uber shift at 11:30 p.m., the same time he'd been starting night shifts for 9 years. At 48 years old, Marcus had found a rhythm that worked for him. Sleep during the day, drive at night, interact with people but never long enough for deep connections. Keep moving, stay busy, don't think too much about the past. The late-night shift in Chicago was different from daytime driving. Different passengers, different energy, different risks. Most drivers avoided these hours, but Marcus preferred them. Fewer cars on the road meant easier navigation. Night shift workers appreciated reliable transportation. And something about the darkness felt familiar to Marcus in ways he didn't like to examine too closely. What his passengers didn't know was that before Marcus Chen became an Uber driver working Chicago's overnight hours, he had been Captain Marcus Chen, United States Army Special Forces, 5th Special Forces Group. 12 years of active duty, including multiple classified deployments to places that officially didn't exist in any Army records. A man who had conducted covert operations, advanced reconnaissance, personnel extraction, and missions that required moving through hostile territory without being detected. When Marcus left the military 8 years ago, it hadn't been by choice. A training accident had damaged his left knee badly enough that he could no longer meet the physical requirements for Special Forces operations. The Army had offered him a desk job, but Marcus couldn't imagine transitioning from field operations to paperwork. So he'd taken his discharge, come home to Chicago where he'd grown up, and tried to figure out what someone with his particular skill set did in civilian life. Uber driving had seemed like a strange choice to his former teammates. Why would a Special Forces operator want to drive strangers around a city? But Marcus understood something that others didn't. His training had been about more than combat. It had been about situational awareness, threat assessment, route planning, staying calm under pressure, and protecting people. Those skills translated perfectly to navigating a city at night, recognizing potentially dangerous situations, and keeping passengers safe. That Friday night started normally. Marcus picked up a nurse finishing her shift at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, a regular customer who he transported 3 times a week. Then a group of friends leaving a late dinner downtown. Then a couple heading home from a concert. Standard fares, pleasant conversations, no complications. By 2:45 a.m., the city was settling into its quietest hours. The bars were closed, the restaurants shuttered, the streets mostly empty except for occasional taxis, delivery trucks, and other Uber drivers like Marcus working the overnight shift. Marcus had just dropped off a fare in Lincoln Park when his phone pinged with a new ride request. Pickup location was in Wicker Park, a trendy neighborhood that was usually safe but had been experiencing an uptick in street crime recently. Passenger name, Emily. Marcus accepted the ride and headed toward the pickup location, automatically scanning his surroundings the way he'd been trained to do, not paranoid, just aware. Traffic patterns, people on sidewalks, vehicles that seemed out of place, anything that didn't fit the normal rhythm of the neighborhood at this hour. When he pulled up to the pickup address, a residential building on a quiet street, he immediately noticed something wasn't right. His passenger, a young woman who appeared to be in her early 20s, came running out of a building entrance and practically dove into his back seat. Drive. Please just drive. Now. Her voice was shaking, breath coming in gasps. Marcus's Special Forces training kicked in instantly. Assess the threat, protect the principal, execute extraction. His eyes went to his rearview mirror and caught what the young woman had been running from. A man about 30 years old had emerged from the same building entrance and was now walking quickly toward Marcus's car. Marcus didn't ask questions. He pulled away from the curb smoothly but quickly, putting distance between his vehicle and the man who was now staring after them with an expression Marcus recognized from his military days, the look of someone who hadn't expected their target to escape. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Marcus kept his voice calm and professional while continuously monitoring his mirrors. "I'm not hurt, he wouldn't leave me alone. I met him at a bar earlier, and he seemed nice, but then he followed me home and tried to force his way into my building. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't, and I was scared, so I called an Uber to get away, but he saw me getting in." Emily was talking fast, words tumbling over each other with fear and adrenaline. Marcus glanced in his rearview mirror again. The man had gotten into a dark sedan that had been parked nearby and was now following them. Not subtle about it either, staying close, clearly not planning to let them disappear. This was a problem, a significant problem, but it was exactly the kind of problem Marcus had been trained to solve, just in different contexts. "Emily, I need you to listen to me carefully. The person who was following you is now following this car. I'm going to lose him, but I need you to stay calm and trust me. Can you do that?" "Oh my God, he's following us." Emily's voice rose with panic. "Yes, but I promise you're safe. I've dealt with this kind of situation before. Just keep your head down and let me drive." Marcus's mind was already running through options. He couldn't just drive to Emily's destination. That would lead the follower directly to her home address. He couldn't call the police yet because they were moving, and by the time police responded, the situation could escalate. He needed to lose the tail and get Emily somewhere safe, using skills he hadn't employed in civilian context before, but that were as ingrained in him as breathing. Chicago's street grid was familiar territory to Marcus after 9 years of driving, but now he wasn't thinking like an Uber driver. He was thinking like a special forces operator conducting an evasion maneuver in hostile territory. He took a right turn onto a busier street, maintaining normal speed, not revealing that he knew he was being followed. The dark sedan followed. Marcus made mental notes. The vehicle was a newer model Dodge Charger, dark blue or black, male driver alone, keeping a consistent distance of about 30 yards. "Emily, I need to ask you something important. Does this person know where you live, your actual address?" "I don't think so. I didn't tell him. I told him I lived somewhere else when he asked earlier." "Good. That's good. Now, do you have someone you can call, family or friends who can meet you somewhere safe?" "My roommate. She's at our apartment in Lakeview." "Okay, when I tell you, I want you to text your roommate. Tell her to call the police and report that someone has been stalking you and following you. Give them the description of the car following us, but don't text yet. Wait until I say..." Marcus made another turn, then another, moving deeper into the grid of Chicago streets. The sedan stayed with them. The driver wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore, probably assuming that a random Uber driver wouldn't know what to do about being followed. That assumption was about to prove very wrong. Marcus had conducted dozens of evasion operations during his special forces career. He'd lost tails in Baghdad, Kandahar, and cities whose names he still couldn't mention. Losing a single civilian vehicle in Chicago was going to be significantly easier than losing trained hostile operatives in war zones. He turned onto a street that ran parallel to the Chicago River, accelerated slightly, then suddenly cut across 2 lanes and took a hard right into an alley that most drivers wouldn't even notice. The sedan had to brake and make a wider turn, losing about 5 seconds. Those 5 seconds were all Marcus needed. He accelerated through the alley, which he knew from his years of night driving would connect to a parallel street, emerged onto that street, immediately turned left, then right again into a different alley, creating a series of turns that would be nearly impossible to follow unless the pursuer knew the exact route. By the time Marcus emerged onto North Avenue, the sedan was nowhere in his mirrors, but he wasn't done yet. He'd lost visual contact with the tail, but he needed to make sure it stayed lost. Over the next 10 minutes, Marcus executed a surveillance detection route, a series of turns, speed variations, and route choices designed to identify and permanently lose any tail. Left on Halsted, right on Fullerton, loop through a residential area, back onto a main street, through a parking garage with 2 exits, emerging from the unexpected exit. Emily watched from the back seat as Marcus drove with a level of precision and awareness that seemed impossible for a regular Uber driver. Every turn was deliberate, every decision made with clear purpose. "How do you know how to do this?" she asked, her panic giving way to confused amazement. "I used to do security work. Before I drove Uber, just happened to remember some training." That was the understatement of the decade, but Marcus wasn't about to explain that he'd once conducted covert operations in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. After confirming that they had definitively lost the tail, Marcus pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot in Lakeview, a public place with lights and people where Emily would be safe until her roommate could pick her up. Okay, you can text your roommate now. Tell her where you are. And yes, call the police. File a report about the stalking and the vehicle following you. Give them everything you remember about the person and the car. Emily pulled out her phone with shaking hands and started texting. I don't understand what just happened. You lost him like it was nothing. Like you've done it 100 times. Not quite 100, Marcus said with a slight smile, but I've had some practice with difficult driving situations. You're safe now. That's what matters. Marcus waited with Emily in the parking lot until her roommate arrived 15 minutes later, followed shortly by a Chicago police officer responding to the stalking report. As Marcus gave his statement to the police, carefully describing the incident without revealing exactly how or why he'd known to execute such effective evasion tactics, the officer looked at him with curiosity. Sir, that was some seriously professional evasion driving. Most civilians would have just driven to the destination and called 911. You potentially saved this young woman from a dangerous situation. What's your background? Marcus considered his answer. Military. Long time ago. Some of the training sticks with you. Clearly, the officer said, well, whatever training you had, it made a difference tonight. After Emily was safely with her roommate and the police had all the information they needed, Marcus got back in his car. His hands were shaking slightly. They always did after high-stress situations, even back in special forces. The adrenaline dump was the same whether you were evading hostile forces in Afghanistan or losing a stalker in Chicago. Marcus had planned to continue his shift, but he couldn't. The incident had stirred up too many memories, too many feelings he usually kept buried. He drove home to his small apartment in Pilsen, parked his car, and sat in the darkness trying to process what had happened. For 9 years, he'd been driving Uber without ever needing to use his special forces training. Tonight, for the first time, his old skills had been required in civilian context, and it felt exactly like his military work using specialized knowledge to protect someone vulnerable from a threat they couldn't handle alone. The next morning, Marcus woke to dozens of notifications on his phone. Emily had posted about her experience on social media. Last night, I was being stalked and followed. My Uber driver literally saved my life by losing the guy following us with driving skills that seemed impossible. I don't know what his background is, but I'm alive today because this stranger knew exactly what to do when I was terrified. The post had been shared hundreds of times. Local news had picked it up. Suddenly, Marcus Chen, the quiet Uber driver who worked the overnight shift, was being called a hero. Marcus didn't want the attention. He'd spent years deliberately staying under the radar, doing his job quietly, avoiding situations that would draw focus to his past. But Emily's story had struck a chord with people, especially women who had experienced similar frightening situations and wished they'd had someone who knew how to help. Uber's corporate office reached out to Marcus, wanting to feature his story in their safety training materials. Local news requested interviews. Other drivers wanted to know how he'd learned such effective evasion techniques. Marcus declined most of the attention, but he did agree to speak with Emily one more time when she asked to meet him for coffee a week later. I looked you up, Emily said as they sat in a coffee shop in Logan Square. Not much information available about you online, but I found enough to know you weren't just doing security work before driving Uber, you were special forces. Marcus didn't confirm or deny, just sipped his coffee. I want to say thank you, Emily continued. Not just for getting me away from that guy. The police arrested him, by the way. Turns out he had done this before to other women, but for staying so calm. I was panicking, and you just handled it. Like it was routine. That made me feel safe even when I was terrified. You did well, Marcus said. You recognized danger. You got yourself to a safe location. You made the call for help. That was smart thinking under pressure. But if you hadn't known what to do, if you'd just been a regular driver. But I wasn't. And you're safe. That's what matters. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed changes in how he thought about his work. For 9 years, he'd viewed Uber driving as just a job, something to keep busy, earn money, stay moving. But Emily's situation had reminded him that his work had purpose beyond transportation. He was providing safe passage through a city that could be dangerous, especially during overnight hours when vulnerable people needed reliable protection. Other passengers noticed the change, too. Marcus had always been professional, but now there was something else, a heightened awareness, a protective instinct that passengers, especially women traveling alone late at night, could sense and appreciate. One of his regular customers, a nurse named Jennifer who he picked up from her hospital shift 3 times a week, mentioned it one night. You've always been a safe driver, Marcus, but lately you seem even more aware, like you're actively watching out for problems, not just avoiding them. Had an incident a few weeks ago, Marcus said, reminded me that being careful matters, especially at these hours. I heard about that. You're the driver who lost the stalker, right? That story went everywhere. That was me. Well, I'm grateful you're the one picking me up at 3 a.m. when I'm exhausted and just want to get home safely. Knowing you have that kind of training makes a difference. Marcus continued his overnight Uber shifts, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just driving people from point A to point B. He was providing safe passage through hours when the city could be dangerous, using skills earned in far more dangerous contexts to keep civilians safe in their own city. He also began teaching basic safety awareness to other Uber drivers, not special forces tactics, but practical skills, how to recognize when someone might be in danger, when to trust your instincts, how to report concerns, basic evasion techniques if necessary. 6 months after Emily's incident, Marcus received a message from another passenger he'd driven, a young man who worked as an ER doctor and regularly took Marcus's Uber home after late shifts. Marcus, I wanted you to know I recommended you to my sister. She just moved to Chicago and works night shifts as a paralegal. I told her if she needs a ride late at night, request you specifically. She said you picked her up last week and she felt safer in your car than she's felt in any ride share. Whatever training you have, whatever background you bring to this work, it makes a difference to people. Just wanted you to know that. Marcus read the message and thought about his journey from Special Forces operator to Uber driver. For years, he'd viewed his military service as something separate from his civilian life, a past that was over, skills that had no application in normal society. But Emily's situation had taught him something important. The mission hadn't changed. Whether he was conducting covert operations in hostile territory or driving passengers through Chicago at 3 a.m., the purpose was the same, using his training and awareness to protect people who needed safe passage through dangerous environments. The skills were the same, the mission was the same, only the uniform had changed from military fatigues to civilian clothes, from classified operations to public rideshare, from protecting soldiers to protecting strangers who trusted him with their safety. Marcus Chen still drives Uber in Chicago. He still takes the overnight shift that most drivers avoid, still keeps his car immaculately clean, still knows all the fastest routes. But now his passengers know, or at least the ones who've heard Emily's story know, that their quiet driver carries skills and experience that make him uniquely qualified for this work. Because true service doesn't end with a discharge from military duty. It continues in whatever form allows someone to use their training to protect others. For Marcus Chen, that means providing safe passage through a city that can be dangerous, staying alert when passengers are vulnerable, and being ready to use every skill he learned in special forces if someone's safety depends on it. The threats are different, the stakes are usually lower, but the mission remains the same: get people home safely, no matter what obstacles arise. So tell me, have you ever discovered that someone providing you a service had training that went far beyond what you expected? A driver, a security guard, someone whose background explained their exceptional awareness? Share their story in the comments below, because these are the stories that matter. Veterans who never stopped protecting others, who found new ways to serve, who discovered that the mission to keep people safe doesn't end, it just evolves. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Human Stories for more accounts of quiet heroism and veterans who continue their missions in unexpected ways. Until next time, remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they drive Ubers at 3 a.m., and they're using every skill they learned in covert operations to make sure you get home safe.